Welcome to Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston, PhD. Glenn has held his doctorate in psychology for more than 30 years and is also a former multi-million-dollar consultant to the big food industry and uses his experience to help you defeat your cravings. This show will help you to focus on dramatically reducing cravings and leave the diet mentality behind, so you can more easily and effortlessly achieve your health, fitness, and body composition goals. Please remember, no doctor-patient relationship is created via this show, and you are responsible for confirming any changes to your diet, health, or psychological routines with an appropriately licensed professional before implementing them. Now, before we get started, if you haven't yet downloaded the free smartphone app to access dozens of these recordings all in one place, as well as to avail yourself of a confidential community for support, motivation, and assistance, please visit the podcast link on defeatyourcravings.com as soon as possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Glenn Livingston.
Hey, it's the very good Dr. Glenn Livingston with defeatyourcravings.com, and I'm here with
Dr. Howie Jacobson of AskHowie.com.
And neither of us are the medical type of doctors. We're the PhD type. Howie, I have a somewhat extended quote from Marianne Williamson that I find very inspiring and very apropos of a certain period of recovery when people give up or greatly reduce hyperpalatable food. Would it be okay if we talked about that?
Yes.
The quote is that our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. It's our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? But actually, who are you not to be? You're a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightening about shrinking so that other people won't feel unsure around you. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it's in everyone. As we let our own light shine, we consciously give other people permission to do the same. As we're liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. That's Marianne Williamson. I'm just going to go through a brief explanation, and then I want to hear what you think about it. I don't mean to portray defeat your cravings in a religious light. You can make it work for you regardless of your beliefs, but I think Marianne Williamson really captured the essence of the struggle most overeaters face as they let go of overeating and binge eating. That's why I picked this quote. See, one function of binge eating is to protect you from your fear of your own light, of shining, accomplishing, and allow yourself to recognize all you have to offer, of allowing your purpose to find you. At first, when you give up overeating, processed foods, etc., you'll likely experience this fear as an almost intolerable sense of emptiness and boredom. Is this all there is a good way to describe the feeling so many people go through. You mean to tell me I struggled for all these years and did all this hard work to stop binge eating, only to be plopped down smack in the middle of this nothingness? But I promise you it's not nothingness. What you'll be experiencing in the first few months after letting go of hyperpalatable foods is your brain making room for your light. See, at first your pleasure systems detach from their previous targets. And that comes with great effort and a certain amount of exhaustion. It's only when the task is finally done that you begin to shift towards building new sources of pleasure and purpose. This happens naturally if you don't shift to another addiction. Naturally, but not instantly. Plus, there are fears associated with the shift. Others around us might envy the glow that we begin to exhibit as we first find meaning and purpose. We may have been brought up in an environment where our shining was criticized or belittled. We may have self-judgments to release about allowing ourselves to be all we were meant to be. That's okay, there's no rush. Just don't panic and revert back to the hyperpalatable food, affectionately called pig slop. Recognize that what you're feeling is a normal and natural part of the progress. The only way out is through, and the idea is to let your purpose find you and let your light shine. So I know that sounds a little bit corny, but my experience has been that most people are very thrown. Like it takes, within the 90 days that we work with most people, they're usually able to stop overeating and binge eating. When you give up all that stimulation, life feels a little bit boring. We're so hyper-stimulated by all the packaging and concentration of starch and sugar and fat and salt and excitotoxins that a normal level of stimulation that we'd experience in nature actually feels boring. Sometimes it extends to something called anhedonia, is the inability to experience pleasure for a little while. My experience suggests that if people are not equipped and pre-warned of this transition, that they won't recognize it for what it is and they'll want to go back to binge eating. And so I tell people about this and ask them to just kind of start looking around for the things that they used to find meaning about before they got so addicted to food, and let themselves tolerate the boredom for a short period. It's usually just a couple of months before it starts to shift. And then they're okay with it. But if I don't warn them about this, then they're not. And this is why my hypothesis is that a function of binge eating in part is to prevent you from seeing your light. So what do you think?
That feels very right. If binge eating isn't the fundamental issue, right, it becomes very interesting, right? So if the fundamental issue is it's not safe to show my light, this could be an individual thing or a cultural thing, right? So you grew up in a family where the nail that sticks out gets pounded down.
Yeah.
You will have learned survival tactics to not shine your light. And then binge eating becomes a means of doing something else. It becomes a functionless symptom. Like people could binge eat because it's the binge itself that fills something. So if somebody is, grew up fearing sexual attention and becoming obese was a way to avoid that, even though part of them or a lot of them doesn't want it, but some part of them feels that need, then the binge eating and the eating a lot of pig slop would have a function. But it could also just be a functionless side effect of this unwillingness to risk your own greatness. And we're certainly surrounded by people who will, as soon as somebody makes it, like celebrity culture, we love to see somebody on top get taken down a notch. And I think we can introspect that into our own lives and assume, or think about the nerdy kid in high school who got straight A's, but nobody liked, and the football team beat him up. There's lots of ways we can get this message that your greatness is not welcome here.
Absolutely.
When Marianne Williamson is saying you're giving other people permission to shine, like your yes can be intolerable for people who have not been able to say yes to their own yes.
Yes. I think the solution to that is to shine with some humility and be aware that you're infinitely more capable than you thought you were while you were binging, but still we're human. Like still we make mistakes. And I had a mentor who said that he had moments of genius. And I thought that was insightful. That was a way of allowing yourself to shine, but still having the humility that nobody's a genius all the time. Still having some level of humility. So I thought there was a way of balancing it. I also want to say, Howie, I think behavior first. It's mostly important to look at binge eating as a bad habit that requires a bunch of systems to extinguish and a bunch of alternative habits to extinguish. However, binge eating does function to distract you and prevent you from dealing with these other underlying issues that are probably there. I'm just always a little cautious when we start to talk about the psychology and the relationship that people don't get the impression that I think they have to solve those conflicts first. That make sense?
Yeah. When you start paying attention to the binge eating, right, and we've talked about this a bunch, you create the space for the other healing.
Yeah.
It's really hard to work it the other way around. I don't know anyone personally, but I know people who claim to have had sort of miraculous visitations, living a life of depression, and suddenly they were struck by the realization that we are all one, and none of their thoughts bother them anymore.
Agreed. Cool. Well, I like talking about these fundamental truths with you.
Me too.
And that brings us to the end of today's broadcast of Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston. Now, if you'd like to find out more about the products and services Dr. Glenn offers to help you dramatically reduce your cravings and stop overeating in 90 days or less, please visit defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. That's defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. Thanks.